Okay, we are already a few minutes late. Let's start. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome, everyone. This is our second episode of our webinar series called How to Cope with the Coronavirus Spiritually. Again, for the ones who have joined us before, we have I am hearing my own voice. Can everyone else mute, please?
Yes, we can hear.
Oh, sorry for that. Okay. All right. Sorry for the technical problems. Sorry for the technical problems. I will share my screen again. And first go through the introductory slides. So who are we in Lighthouse for Humanity, the organizing committee? We are non-profit organization, also a Muslim Community Center in Bloomfield, Connecticut, USA. And we are a group of people, a Muslim community whose purpose is to serve all people who are seeking to understand the meaning of life, the universe, and the individual through teachings of the Quran, Sunnah, the practice of the Prophet Muhammad, and the Risalain, or a Quranic commentary. And our motto has been also a quote from the Risalain collection, is that pain-free pleasure comes only with belief. So with that, that is our introduction. So that is actually a very relevant topic in these days. And our speaker today is also relevant in the sense that happiness, how to find happiness in these times of calamities, when people are stuck at home, and when we are faced with problems and we are trying to understand them. So our speaker today is Dr. Necati Aydin. His also pen name known to mainly the Turkish audience is Furkan Aydıner. He's actually an academic and an author. Is a professor of economics at Al Faisal University in Saudi Arabia currently. And he explores well-being from a multidisciplinary perspective. So he was the founding director of the Neuroeconomics and Wellbeing program at Florida State University. He has 2 doctoral degrees, one in education and the other in economics. And he has authored a total of 9 books. 2 of them are actually here. Translated 2 books into English and other languages, I believe. Co-authored 3 books and published many peer-reviewed articles. And 2 of his latest books are here. One of them is 3D of Happiness, which also has this website, 3dhappiness.org. And another one about Risale and this author, Said Nursi, and science in Islam, and about character building. It's a more academic-oriented book. With that, I would like to give the word to Dr. Aydin.
Okay, thank you very much for introduction. Can you hear me well now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So good evening, everyone. It's really a great pleasure to be with you, and it's very good topics. And I know we are stuck at home mostly, and we try to see whether we can somehow find happiness even when we are actually stuck at home. I'm using a laptop and tablet at the same time, so I'm going to do the screen share from there for the slides. And before giving the outline, let's see.
While we are getting the slides, just a note is that for questions, we will take them in writing if you can do a chat to me. My name is Sarah. Send me questions. So in the last 10 minutes or so, we will try to answer them.
Okay, I think we're ready to go. So technically, is there any problem? Are we okay?
Yeah, we can see your slides.
Perfect. Okay. So again, the subject is basically is to see how we can somehow look for happiness even when we're stuck at home. And we are, there will be three parts in presentation. The first part is its definition of happiness, how we define it, and the three dimensions of happiness. That's the first one. I'm kind of hearing echoing of my own voice here. Let's see. Okay. And then after that, we're going to talk about Nursi's view on happiness. And after that, we will review one section from Nursi and see how he particularly deal with the subjects. Now, concept of happiness is actually as old as marriage, so therefore it's really important to clarify definition of concepts. And in what we're going to use it in our presentation is basically going to define happiness as an overall life satisfaction. So that's the key concept for the way we're going to define happiness. So it is when we basically we define happiness as a state of mind in terms of reflecting on entire life experience, which includes past and present and future. That's all together. So in this regard, happiness is actually, we define it different than pleasure and pain. So in a sense that you might have a painful experience, let's say you might be a sick person, and you can still be happy despite this painful experience. And or you might actually be a poor person, and that's again, you can still be happy when you're poor. So our definition of happiness is basically overall life satisfaction when we think about everything in general, rather than just, let's say, a state of emotions at a particular time in terms of whether you have you gain certain pleasure or not. Now, this is a subject that many people, as I mentioned, that personally deals with this one. But for me, that goes beyond the personal interest. And I study the subjects as an academician, and I publish several articles on the subjects, and also I just publish a book on this one. And my research on this subject, I think maybe the first article I wrote in this subject was over 30 years ago. And within this, let's say, 2 decades, that when I read and reflect and try to understand happiness, and I realized that basically mostly we are, talking about happiness within 1 or 2 dimensions. So, and therefore I came up with this concept and say that we need to look at happiness with different dimensional perspective. So I put it basically called pleasure dimension, hedonic, and meaning dimension, Eudemonic. That's come from Aristotle, the Greek concept. And then spiritual dimension, I call it G-donic. So, and in that books, I basically deal with all those 3 dimensions, and both from a personal and a philosophical and scientific perspective. Now I'm going to give brief overview of what I mean by those dimensions. So hedonic dimensions basically means that when you seek the pleasure and seek happiness through the pleasure, and your objective is to maximize, your utility function is basically maximization of pleasure through having, doing, being, loving. Those are basically 4 essential things or variables that determine your total happiness. So again, you can see here that by having, it means mainly possession in terms of what you have, let's say income, wealth, and property, whatever. In terms of doing, we mean experience, and basically it means like doing entertainment or fun activities that bring you a certain pleasure. In terms of being, we mean career or position or status that you gain in the eyes of other individual. So that's basically, it's all about gaining recognition, respects in the eyes of others, that call being. And loving, we mean relationship with others. And basically that's include both friendship and romantic love as well. So in this regard, that our argument here, that we can actually, in hedonic dimension, we can seek happiness by maximizing our pleasure. So in this case, the pleasure maximization can come through having or doing or being or loving the things that we think going to give us the maximum pleasure. Now, the problem with this type of happiness that we argue, it's basically, it's in the literature, they call it the hedonic treadmill. And I call this one a dead loop. That loop basically means that it's always, we start with deprivation of some things, we don't have it. And then we emulate someone who have what we don't have it. That's the second phase. And then we work very hard and accomplish and get what we really want to have it. And sooner or later, then we actually realize that what we get it is really not what we wish or what we want to have it, in the sense that it does not really bring us the happiness that we're looking for. That's, I call, the disappointing phase. So in a sense, that's deprivation, emulation, accomplishment, and disappointment is like go in a circular manner. And again, so we come back to the first step, and then we look at for something else. So, and that's, I call that loop is the first letter of all those four words. And that can happen for having, let's say you don't have a car and you have a dream of having, let's say, your dream car, and you look at those individuals who have such car, and that's, you emulate them. And then you work hard and make money, and eventually you get the car, and let's say after a few weeks or few months, not more than that, you realize that basically this car is not really giving you what you were expecting from that in terms of the happiness. And now you will start to look at something else, and again, you look at this loop and go engage in this same circle again. And similarly, it then happen with doing some things, let's say for entertainment, and you can travel and you can have different experience, and then you realize that sooner or later, that's also hit the dead end. Similarly, it happened with career goal and success in life, and also with loving as well. So our argument here that, and basically in economics, we call this one diminishing marginal utility. So because this, we teach this one as the law in economics, and because of that, no matter what you do, eventually that utility you gain, the pleasure you gain from this accomplishment will go towards zero, and you will get disappointed again, and you have to look at something else. Now, once we, let's say, work hard and realize that the hedonic way, or the way of seeking pleasure alone, is not going to bring happiness, then we will look at some things we call meaning dimension. And in this case, we'll look at some other kind of goal in life that will try to do something that's meaningful. And by meaning dimension, basically means that now our objective is not just a pleasure, our objective is to actually do something meaningful. That we have a pleasure maximization and meaning maximization together. And again, that this can, our objective in this case, to maximize virtue or excellence. That success comes under this one. Like, let's say, establishing family, like, let's say, getting a job that you think is going to make good contribution to humanity. Those all are part of Eudemonic dimension. And even actually, sometimes we put the meaning under two categories. Temporal means worldly meaning, and transcendental, which is the meaning go beyond this world. So in this case, what we mean here, for eudaimonic dimension, and this is again came from Aristotle initially as an idea. Eudaimonic is a Greek concept. That our objective is to actually maximize our worldly meaning, which means mainly accomplishment, success, and whatever that's with things, virtues in the eyes of other individuals in this world. It's purely secular. And in what we did, even we put it believing also within this dimension. If we basically, let's say, engage in believing purely for this worldly outcome, meaning that, let's say, we become religious because religiosity helping us to somehow have peace of mind, or maybe can help us to be more successful in this world. So help us to establish some good relationship. That's, we call it the secular belief. And we include this one under eudaimonic dimension as well. So again, you can, but the third dimension, so our argument here is that in the book we had a detailed discussion that eudaimonic dimension is actually is also doomed to be within the dead loop, which means that eventually we'll hit the dead end, and that will also not going to give us a lasting satisfaction. And at this level, again, either we'll fall into depression, or we're going to look at for some other things that we call looking for different dimensional experience. So, and in this regard, we offer basically the G-donic as a third dimension, that is the dimension of spirituality. And in G-donic dimension, again, you see this is first one is Hedonic dimension, it's a pleasure. The second one is Eudemonic dimension, is the meaning, mainly worldly meaning. And now the third one is G-donic dimension, is this is believing. Now, in this case, basically we include, so we have still, we look at pleasure and we look at the meaning in terms of, let's say, success and accomplishment. But now we have faith as a multiplier that basically affect the meaning and affect the pleasure both together. So in this case, basically believing is does not necessarily mean that we have to abstain from the meaning and the pleasure. It means that it is another, again, variable into our model that can, depends on what we believe and how we believe, can actually multiply the meaning and the pleasure from our experience. So I want to briefly give some more detailed information about this spiritual dimension, because again, our main topic is on this dimension. So this dimension is mainly centered around the belief in the existence of God and the hereafter. Both has to be together. And we think that the three key elements of this is knowing, meaning, and believing are the three elements of a happy life within the G-donic model. So by knowing means, we actually mean having realization, that means having understanding of the ultimate reality besides the observed phenomena. And in this regard, finding some satisfying answer to some key question, ontological question in terms of who I am, what is the ultimate reality, and why am I here? So, and that's basically in G-donic dimension, those questions are very important, and you find you find a satisfactory answer to yourself to those questions. So, and then you set the objective that your goal, your purpose is not to maximize your outcome in this world. The goal is to maximize the outcome beyond this life. So you have transcendental purpose. So in this case, your utility function is very much different than Hedonic and Eudemonic. And in everything that you do, you try to see how this is going to help you to accomplish some things that is beyond this world, beyond this life. And again, the essential part here is whether you believe in this and believe, have some conviction on existence of God, and then you basically, based on the understanding of God, that you try to live a life accordingly. Now, the way we define the happiness in this dimension, we define as an inner tranquility through remembrance of God. That when we remember God, meaning that He is God consciousness, that you basically feel the presence of God, and you believe the presence of God with you wherever you go. And that gives you a certain tranquility and joy in this regard, and assurance from, let's say, any dangers that you might have. And in this regard, we actually, even though, tonight we're going to talk about site mercy, we think that the G-donic dimension can be applicable to any religion with belief in God as all-knowing and all-powerful. So as long as it all depends on how certain they are in such belief, because again, G-donic is God-centered type of experience. So, and as long as they have a belief and they are basically assured from themselves that that's really true things, that then I think they can be happy within this dimension as well. So again, it's all about living with the conscious of God by remembering Him through His action in the universe. Now, in the second part, now we're going to talk about a key figure, Said Nursi, that we actually think that he is the one that he preached the G-donic happiness, and he also practiced G-donic happiness. So, and in a sense that it's really interesting, even though he spends almost half of his adult life in prison or exile and confinement, and he managed through the G-donic happiness, he managed to basically convert this prison into paradise-like life for himself and for his followers. So, and I did conduct some study among his followers as well, and I actually read his works, which consists of over 6,000 pages. I read his works several times, and I think that Nursi is one of very important figures in terms of understanding G-donic happiness. So therefore, we're going to reflect on Nursi's lives and the way that he accomplished that. So interesting part, first of all, Nursi is actually, his name is Said. Said is Arabic word. Said in Arabic means happy. So in a sense that, I don't know whether that's pure coincidence, but it's interesting one that his name is happy. And I will argue that my reading of his writing that he preached and practiced true happiness, his message goes centered around authentic happiness. But his life, is, in one perspective, is very miserable life. So he lived most of his life in mandatory or voluntary deprivation. So 32 years of his life passed in wars, captivation. He was POW, an exile, a house arrest, or in prisons. And that's against more than almost half of his adult life. And when he had opportunity to basically, at the peak of his career, to enjoy the worldly, to enjoy his worldly opportunity, he actually abstained from those voluntarily. I think so.
Screen share stopped.
Screen share stops, right? Let me see why. Okay, I'll be back.
We can see it now. Yes.
Good. We're here. Okay. Everything's normal now?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. So again, that when he had opportunity to, at the peak of his career, to enjoy his life, he voluntarily abstained from this worldly opportunity. And he later on wrote and published, many 12 major books, and his message, as I mentioned, centered around happiness in this world and in the hereafter. So unlike many religious scholars, that mainly, if you look at particularly for Muslim religious scholars, their message is always goes around the happiness in the hereafter, in the sense that the concept of paradise, fire. And Nursi's writing, Nursi argues that the life in the life in hellfire or paradise begin in this world before actually going thereafter. So therefore, he actually emphasized the importance of having another life for right now.
Oh, because you were you fell
Yes.
mute. No, we couldn't catch the last like 10, 15 seconds.
Okay. So we're back now again.
Yes, we should be.
Okay, so again, basically, as I mentioned, that I was talking about, so Nursi, unlike many Muslim scholars, Nursi emphasized the importance of having a paradise-like life in this world, as well as in the hereafter. So his message is not that you again, you basically commit, you do good deeds, and then you will go to paradise, and God will reward you in the hereafter. No, his argument is that actually, if you follow what God tells you, you will experience paradise in this world before going to the paradise in the hereafter. And also, he argues strongly that if you don't really follow, in this case, the spiritual path, you will experience hell-like life in this world before going to the actual hellfire in the hereafter. So therefore, it's really, when I read Nursi, so in a sense that Nursi is telling, if your life in this world is not like a paradise, don't really expect that you're going to get into the paradise in the hereafter. If you feel like you have a life that's really, you feel is like a hell in this world, and Nursi is kind of telling that, be afraid that you might actually, you might going toward the hellfire. So in the sense that he basically, makes a strong connection between the worldly life and the expected life in the hereafter from Islamic perspective. And so, as I mentioned, that despite he was in, most of his life was in prison and exile, when he was asked how he was feeling, how was his life, so I think, again, there's a connection.
It just stopped. Screen share.
Is it from my side, your side?
It seems to be yours.
Really?
You might need to restart the screen share. It might be Zoom itself, but you might need to restart the screen share.
Screen share here, I see. So I think maybe that's some. Okay.
Yep, you can see it now.
So it's basically, despite his life in prison and exile, when he was asked by his followers how was he doing, and so it's really interesting how he answered in one of the letters, in the books called The Letters. And he says, the question was, are you comfortable? How are you? And his answer, and normally the letter answer was written from prison, and so rather than listing the problem that he was facing and complaining all these things, he said, I offer endless thanks to the most merciful of the merciful, that he's transformed the various wrongs the world did perpetrate against me into the various forms of mercy. So in a sense that he's basically, this statement is very clear, that Nursi believes in a God that who is in control of everything, that despite that those individuals who were literally putting him in jail and exile because he was just writing some religious book, And Nursi was actually thinking that, this evil actions of those evil guys was actually, for him, converted to the mercy with the mercy of God. How? So again, if we read, he will say, to a prisoner of war in Russia, I made up my mind to withdraw into a cave toward the end of my life and pray for it. So that was his wish, his desire. The most merciful of the merciful made Barla, that's the town that he was forced to live in exile. He made Barla the cave and bestowed the benefits without burdening my weak self with the difficulty and troubles of cave. So in a sense, that's basically what he's saying, that he's saying it was like it was his prayers that was accepted through those guys, that those guys, even though they thought they are actually doing the evil things, their intention was not good, but they intend to harm Nursi. But God, with his mercy, convert this harmful events into a merciful one that helped Nursi to accomplish his objective. In a sense, so what does this mean? It means this basically Nursi wanted to really abstain from social life and do some things sincerely for the sake of God. But he wanted to just go and live in a cave. And then when you really read the life of Nursi and his accomplishments, he realized that going through this exile and prison and gave him an amazing, unique opportunity to reach to the pure sincerity and focus in whatever he wanted to do long time ago, and through writing his books that called Risale and Nur. And in a sense that you will feel as if he will say, if I had not had such terrible tournament from those evil guys, perhaps I could not have accomplished such sincere outcome, which for me, it's worth of all the pain I had to go through. So that's really is very interesting perspective and a very interesting way to look at life in this regard. So in this case, for Nursi, basically his life was all about God-centered life. So for him, God is not the first cause. God is the only cause of everything. God is not hidden. God is visible through everything. God actually is real, and everything else is not real, is just shadows that's contingent on the reality of God. And God is all good. And God is all powerful, is all knowing, is all seeing, and all omnipresent. And God is in control of everything, including one's personal life, including social life as well. Okay, things that we...
Yeah, again, you might need to share again every time you change slides, I guess.
Yeah, I think we get the sharing problem again.
Yes, that's visible.
Okay. Yeah, I think that slide was not shown. Okay. Yeah, that didn't show maybe completely. So as I mentioned, that's basically that when Nursi was very thankful, even when he was in prison. And again, why he was that? Because he believed in a God that basically is all good, all powerful, all knowing, all seeing. Against this is not showing what I do here.
You could see your screen. but now it stopped.
Yeah, I know that's.
If it'll be better, you can stop your video as well, if that will make the flow better.
Okay, can we see now?
Yes.
Okay. So again, so the reason that he was basically very thankful despite all this calamities and problem in his life, that because that his views of God as being all good, all powerful, knowing that's basically center and shape all of his understanding. So the way I visualize like this, that he believed in a God that's with certain attributes, and he believed that God is actually revealing himself through his words. That's revelation comes through the prophets. And also God revealed himself through his works, that his works in the universe. So in that case, it's basically this revelation comes through the personal experience as a human, and then comes through what you observe in the universe. And the words comes from, again, the messengers and the books with the messengers. And he realized that in his views that basically as long as you pay attention to the words and the works of God, and you live your life by submission to God, that's he defines to be believer, and basically you will end up, you remember, you reflect on the works of God and read the words of God, and you remember the God, and you respond it by having certain good characters like being humble, honest, thankful, peaceful, caring, sharing, praying. So those are, he thinks that important characters of being a good believer. And that's basically how he perceived. In this regard, for him, this God is in control of everything. And if God is good, and if God is in control of everything, everything is good. And so in this regard, that's basically, he perceived his life in the same way as well. But he thinks the problem is in modern society that God is really, as we know, which from Nietzsche's, that God is that. And he argues that now people through secular scientific education, rather than worshiping God as the creator of everything, then they basically worship calls and nature and laws, as he called them, ideals and false gods. His argument is that you can't do it without God. So the question is that either you believe a God of everything, or you make everything else as a God in a sense. So therefore, he basically claimed that we live in a desperate life because that we actually lose the concept of God in our life in a true sense. And he argues that when they ask him why his books is very successful compared to other books that millions are actually reading and changing their life, he argues that the main things in his book that basically he shows his books called Risale-i Nur. Risale-i Nur demonstrate that in misguidance there is a sort of hell in this world, while in belief there is a sort of paradise. So, and that's basically, he argued, this is too many comparison, many stories in his book that he made a lot of emphasis on this one. So his argument is that there is, in belief, there is a paradise in this world, and in non-belief, there is a hellfire in this world. You don't have to work and wait for the hereafter to go to paradise or to the hellfire. So, and then he mentions, again, he had a lengthy discussion in terms of hell-like life in modern times and why we live in such life. And basically, again, he says that, this is the torture and pain that we have, it is mainly because of the lack of God in our life. And then we, let's say, make worldly things, money or position or pleasure as a kind of God for us, and therefore, and in a sense that he says that we are trapped into the triple paradise, that power, the will to power, will to pleasure, will to praise, that's like a fame, and he argues that's really the false promise of a modern time in terms of bringing paradise-like a life for us, and he argues that that's actually false and that's not possible. So for him in this regard, it's very, it's really and what in this regards, again, as I mentioned, that he reflects, he put God at the center of his life, and he very much lived a life within this G-donic, God-centered dimension. And he points to the problem of modern time in terms of being godless and actually putting an emphasis on power, pleasure, and praise. And there are certain things in life that Nursi is actually, if we're going to pay attention, it gives us a big clue in terms of how Nursi managed to be happy, despite the fact that he was in most of his time in exile, in prison. And I think in time-wise, I don't know, Mustafa, what are we going to do? When do you want me to stop? We had some.
We can continue for another 5-6 minutes, and in the last 5 minutes or so we can take questions. And I would like to remind everyone that you can text me in the Zoom chat your questions to me, and I can read them to our speaker. But currently we can continue for another 5 to 7 minutes.
Okay, so that will finish by at least most 55. Okay, so again, I'm going to emphasize a few important things to really somehow give you a glimpse of Nursi's world views and Nursi's worlds that really brings him happiness when he was even in prison. So first of all, for Nursi is, again, if we actually live in this time, now we look at it, what is the most important issue? We'll say it's really to find a solution for coronavirus. But we cannot kill the virus, and when you get into the human body, there's no medicine at this for now, and there's no vaccine as well, and it's disseminating. So in this case, that's basically, we think it's very important to do everything to protect ourselves against the virus. And when some people make an argument and say, no, you know, only mortality rate is low, let's say 2-3%, and we say that is not a good judgment. Why? Because, you know, human life is very valuable, and we need to do everything. The economy stops, the life stops. We do everything to just see how we can deal with the virus. Why? Because this is the most important issue for the entire humanity. Now, Nursi will say, I think Nursi will be very, very, amazed. He will say, look, you know, why you're afraid of coronavirus? Because coronavirus is one way of actually dying. But his argument says, okay, even if you find solution for coronavirus, and let's say you cannot find it, let's say there's another virus called death virus, meaning that there is something called death and you cannot avoid it. And it's actually, in this case, 100% of humanity is going to be inflicted by this death virus. And there is 100% of risk of catching this virus. The only issue is just a matter of time, you know, and it's basically whether you're gonna, let's say, catch this virus called that virus within, let's say, you know, a few days or few years or few months. That's really the only differences. Now, in this case, Nursi's argument is that since death cannot be killed and the door of grave cannot be closed, and if there is a way of being saved from the execution of the appointed hour, that's ajal in Islamic term, and the solitary confinement of the grave, then it should be the most important issue for humanity. So basically, Nursi is saying that, look, you know, now protection from coronavirus is the most important thing for humanity. But look, you know, why it's most important? Because that we need to save the life. But Nursi will say, look, death is inevitable, that we cannot purely, just as you can see in this pictures, just dig or bury our head under the sand like an ostrich and ignore deny the reality of that. Nursi will say, no, that should be the most important issue for humanity. And indeed, it was the most important issue for Nursi as well. And this, you know, concept and consciousness of that in Nursi basically changed everything for him, because the concept of success for him was different, failure was different, the way he perceived life was very much different because of that. So it's like one example. What we see is a success, basically, like when Nursi was back from Russia in captivity, he was a POW, and he actually lived in Istanbul and got a full-time job, and he had very high position and was getting good salary, was actually living in a good side in Çamlıca called in Istanbul, very good place. And he says that was, for many people, they will consider this, he was a very fortunate person. And but when Nursi reflect on his life, it's really for many people, something is one enviable. It was gold because he accomplished something in life. But he described this part of his life as more pitiable life, not admirable. And he said that when I look at, let's say, this salary, position, and the work opportunity, and then I study the circumstances and causes to which I felt genuine attachment, and which I suppose was the source of happiness in this world. And then he says, but whichever of them I study, I saw that it was rotten, it was not worth the attachment, it was deceptive. And he said, I felt disgust at the world. So that's basically when Nursi saw the true reality of the worldly life and realized that, it's the worldly life itself is not worthy of the goal for human being, because again, it's temporarily, because there is the reality of that out there. So we have to, in this case, rethink about, our life and see what we can do in this life. So in this regard, Nursi's reflection is on the self first, and start with that. And when we read Nursi has the concept of multiple dimension of the self. Self is not singular anymore. It's actually, you have, let's say, you have the mind, you have the heart, you have the will, you have the nafs. There are different concepts, and that's part of the selves. And I work on this one long time ago and publish an article on that, and in this regard. And Nursi is understanding that basically we can put at two part of the Sadat, certain elements of human nature that need to be controlled and restrained, like an animal soul, like the ego, like we call the oppressive ego. And there are certain elements of human nature that need to be flourished, like the heart, the spiritual parts, the conscious, the mind. And then he thinks that we can use the free will, in this case, that basically enrich the one side and control the other side. And through that, we can basically gain certain excellence in spiritually, intellectually, morally. And then we can gain the God's pleasure. And once we get this one as a byproduct of this, then we're going to basically have a happy life in this world and have a happy life in the hereafter. So in this regard, Nursi actually does not see happiness as the primary objective. He sees happiness as a byproduct of living a godly life. That's basically when you have God at the center of your life, then when you realize your nature and then you live your life based on, again, the guidance from God, that you can reach the excellence and reach the happiness in this world and hereafter. So again, in Nursi's understanding, human beings like very complex creatures with multiple dimensions, and he uses metaphors of kings and dogs, and again, driver will use this one. So we don't have that much time on this. And again, which depends on how you use your potential. You can be the best of the best, or you can be the worst of the worst as well. And so the key part here is try to see how you can use them within a certain, what he calls, without going to the extreme, that basically the concept in Arabic is wasat. And in this regard, that you can basically flourish and unleash your potential and be good human beings. So again, so that's his understanding of human being. There are other concepts as well in terms of his understanding of time. We don't have time to talk about that one. His understanding of establishing your spiritual palace and reaching your spiritual side. And his understanding of, again, enlightening those palaces. And his understanding of that having really unique universe based on your perception. He says that everyone, there are worlds, one within the other, to the number of human beings, meaning that even though we live in the one world, the same world, but in reality, in his understanding, we all makes our own world based on our perception, based on our understanding of the worldly experience. And again, he find a way that to see the beauty in everything, even in the ugliest things, that he basically thinks that once we get such perspective, that everything will become beautiful for us. And he find a way to see how you can establish, use the love in a proper way and establish friendship with everything, including animals and non-living beings in the universe. And again, he gives the guidance in terms of how to love what you love and for pleasure in the name of God. And then he mentioned that will be the love of God. And again, there's a discussion on that one. And he mentioned that how you can be the richest person in the universe once you truly believe in God and actually rely on his power, since God alone is the owner of everything. And once you become the sincere servant of God, the universe that belongs to God will become like your own property. And that's again in terms of the wealth as well. And in terms of the value as well, it says that you can gain the highest value through faith, that the belief can give you high value. And one of the key arguments, he says, we are not happy with anything short of eternity. And he believes that, he thinks that against a belief with the sense of certainty that we're going to have eternal life, that is the belief that's going to give us a true happiness. And again, he thinks that we'll prefer eternity. That's really a very interesting argument as well. And when it comes to the fame, he thinks fame is actually like poisonous honey, that even though it might look delicious, but it is actually is going to be detrimental and killing. So therefore, he thinks we should do everything to avoid fame in any case. And again, finally, he thinks that the problem is we are seeking happiness through multiplicity. And he thinks that we need to really just look for one thing, that is God and God's pleasure, not many things. So, and he refers to one phrase from Maulana Jami, and he says, want only one, the rest are not worth one thing. Hold one, the others will not come to your assistance. Seek one, the rest are not worthy. See one, the others are not seen all the time. Know one, knowledge other than that which assists knowledge of him is without benefit. And say one, words not concerning him may be considered meaningless, ultimately. So in a sense, that's basically saying, look, the reason that people are not happy because they are looking for many, many things to be happy. But if they actually seek happiness through the one only, that's basically God, then everything can, it doesn't matter what they are or what they have and how they live, and they can still be happy with this God. And again, in the slides, you can find it that he will talk about his amazing experience. You will be shocked at what is this one. Then actually the amazing experience he will define that give him the pleasure in which he said that he wants to, he receives such pleasure from this actually experience that make him to forget everything else and make him to actually want him to die at the pleasure of that moment. And that pleasure he's talking about is basically there was trees and winds, and he was just reflecting on those leaves and the trees, and that reflection took him to the level that he gained the pleasure. He said that pleasure at that moment for him was about all the pleasure he had in life. So in a sense that you can see, it's basically in G-donic dimension that you don't really have to, it's not necessary to travel to a long distance to gain such amazing experience, because everything can be amazing, and in everything that you can have amazing, pleasure. through this experience. Okay, I think
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
all.
that was great, and I hope we can make these slides available either on our website or something like that. So, because you had to go through some of them quickly, I can see. So, hopefully, and we can also continue in one of the future episodes with your with more in-depth discussion and more of some of these stuff. We only have time for one question. One question that came to me that strikes me is, what does evidence-based conviction mean as a daily spiritual practice? Is the question. What does evidence-based conviction mean as a daily spiritual practice?
I think that basically it means that in Nursi's understandings, belief is not just believing in something that is unseen. He thinks that God is actually making himself shown through everything. So in this regard, that when you look at a flower, when you look at a bird, when that you should be able. Are we?
Yeah, I just shared my
Okay,
screen.
okay. So there's no. So in this regard, he's basically his argument is that when no matter whatever you look at it, as long as you have a good reflection and you have good way of reading what you are seeing, that you can always see the sign of God and actually feel the presence of God. So in a sense that you will feel this way, Nursi will say, when you look at something, if you're not really amazed, that means either you are in heedlessness, ghafla, or you are ignorance, that you don't really know it. Like, take anything that you want to look at it. If you get a drop of water and you reflect, let's say, with knowledge that you have it, what's made waters of hydrogen and oxygen, what is the property of hydrogen and oxygen, and how come this can actually give you some things that's amazing and necessary for life to really emerge and to sustain. So his argument is that that's basically in this regard, that when you reflect even on a droplet of water, that you should be able to feel the presence of God, because that droplet of water for sure will give you a conviction that this is the work of God, and this can only be possible with the power and the knowledge and wisdom and the mercy of God. So for Nursi in this regard, really to get such God consciousness and to be able to see God in everything, through everything, give you such feeling that you are, in the presence of God. And being in the presence of God, that's basically give you a protection of God and give you assurance that you are in the safe hands and you don't have to worry about it. As long as you make a choice.
Thank you very much. I think we are also 5 minutes over our allotted time. So I would like to thank all the attendees and also our speaker, of course, Dr. Aydin. And as I said, hopefully we can take the discussion further in one of the future episodes. With that said, we will be continuing our sessions every week for at least as soon as we can secure speakers in the following weeks. But we would like to do that as long as we can. And with that said, I would like to thank everyone again for participating. And this will be available on YouTube, the recording and the slides. If Dr. Aydin can share, we will be able to share it also with you on our website or the way it is appropriate. Feel free to contact us at lh4h.org. Info@lh4h.org is the email address that you can reach us. And Dr. Aydin has a website called 3dhappiness.org, which is also connected to his book called 3D of Happiness. So again, thank you, Dr. Aydin, and thank you everyone for joining. Have a great day. Assalamu
Thank
alaikum.
you for this opportunity. I wish a great happiness to everyone, inshallah.
Yeah, if you would like to do a final dua or supplication, Dr. Aiden, it will be great.
Again, I think that's basically that the Shabbat Dua. I think that's this is what we really I think are looking for in terms of having authentic happiness. And I think in one way that we are all stuck at home, and we might think that's very difficult and hard time. But I think that also should be seen as an opportunity. Maybe we can look at some other way to seek happiness. My argument is that if you really gain a good way of reflection and reading, and I argue that you never get bored, you get only tired, and just because human you might get tired. So therefore, I think that in a way that's a great opportunity, and I wish that I pray that we all would take advantage of this, and rather than looking at multiplicity in the markets and seeking for this happiness. And I think we hopefully can turn into our spiritual dimension, intellectual dimension, and have a deep reflection. And I think that will give us a very very good joy and pleasure as well, inshallah. So I wish this such a experience, a good experience for everyone within this.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much again, and thanks everyone. And this will be end of our webinar. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.